What's going on, everybody? I hope you're doing well and I hope your weekend has been good so far. Man, I'm really looking forward to the Thanksgiving holiday coming up. I'm just ready to eat and take a nap, to be honest with you, and just take a break from the world. But that being said, this video we're going to be talking about a topic that I think gets overlooked when it comes to the sport of archery, especially for new archers, and I really wanted to stress this. Now, if you've watched any of my content, you always know that I stress the safety aspects of the sport of archery. And that has a lot of little different things that you are responsible for as the archer to make sure that you are keeping yourself safe and not putting anybody else in harm's way. So we're going to talk about a few things to look for. We're going to talk about a few things to check whenever you're out on the range or whenever you're out at your favorite spot to practice, whether that's your backyard or your local target range, whatever that is. So I'm going to start with the bow. Let me get one off the rack and I'll show you some things to look for whenever you go out to target practice. All right, so starting with the bow, if you use a takedown bow like I do, which I really love takedown bows, one of the things that you really want to be mindful of is right here. Make sure that your limb bolts are actually secured. Always check those. It only takes a few minutes, especially if you've got an Allen key. I would say keep that in your quiver or keep it in your pocket whenever you get ready to go out and shoot, because the last thing you want is these limb bolts backing out. Now, I've never had one back out, but that doesn't mean that it can't happen. But what happens is if they back out, your limbs are going to flop around in the limb pockets, and it could come completely out, enough so that it would actually fly off and hit you in the head, or worse yet, hit you in the eye, something to that effect. So you really want to make sure that your limb bolts are secure. Another thing too with the limb pockets, what I would do whenever you take your limbs off, if you ever take your limbs off, just check the screws, make sure that everything's good with this limb pocket, because these are metal. And unless you're using a one-piece or an ILF bow, these screws in here, I've had to tighten those down, especially on a new bow that I've gotten before, just to make sure that they were secure. Not that the limb pocket was loose, but they were sticking up just a little bit. So that's just one area you really want to look at. Looking at the riser, I would check the riser periodically just to make sure that there's no cracks or delaminations happening in the riser, because what could actually happen is this thing could snap half in two on you whenever you're at a full draw, because you're pulling a lot of pressure back on those limbs, and all of that is bending right in the center, if you will. So the riser is going to take a lot of abuse as you're shooting. So you really want to make sure that, especially with laminated risers like this, metal riser not so much, but with a laminated riser, make sure that you're checking these from time to time. And if you see any damage with it, stop shooting it. You don't want to put yourself in an unsafe situation. Of course, the next is up your limbs. You want to make sure that your limbs are good. Always look for damage to the limbs. Look for any delamination in this area here. You want to make sure that all of that's good. And last but not least, you want to make sure that your limb tips are actually in good working order. Now this one, let me see if I can get this angled around where you can see that a little better. Now this one, the string's off because this is the upper limb, but you want to check in this groove here. Make sure there's no burring, no damage to that. You want to make sure that there's no chance that anything in this area is going to cut your string. You also want to make sure, if you're using phenolic reinforced tips, that they are secure and they're not going to come off, because again, this right here is going to take a lot of force from that string when you're pulling back, and you want to make sure that everything is secure and in good working order. And I think if you do that, if you get into the habit of checking your bow whenever you're getting ready to go practice, it just becomes almost like a muscle memory, if you will. It's something that you do automatically. Every time I string my bow, I always check. I check the limbs, I check the riser, I check the tips, I make sure that everything's in good working order. Speaking of that, the next thing you want to do is check your string. Always inspect your string. Look for any kind of fraying, any damages, any nicks. You want to make sure, especially up in this area here, where you're actually putting those on the string grooves, make sure that this is not cut or damaged. Make sure that you don't have any fraying. One thing I've noticed with this fast flight string is I'll get a little bit of fraying in here, and I don't know if that's because it's rubbing on the limb itself whenever you take it down. Now this is normally on the top limb, but always check and make sure that your string is good. Now, if you're talking about these little tag ends right here, when you're talking about a Flemish twist string, don't worry about those so much. That's nothing to be concerned about. Really, you're just looking for damage along the length of the string. And if all's good there, you're good to take that bow out and shoot it. So next, let's talk about arrows just a little bit and some things you need to look out for. And I've got some examples of, some really bad shots that I made, but it's a perfect thing to talk about in this video. Next up on the list, your arrows. You want to make sure that you are really inspecting these, especially if you shoot carbon arrows. Now, I've got a few examples here of some bad shots that I've taken, and I've saved the arrows just to keep me mindful to check things as I'm going along. Now, if you're shooting the traditional aluminum arrows, old school if you will, these are pretty tough. They can take a beating, but you do have a situation where you can damage these. You can bend them, you can break them. If you look at this one, I don't know if you can see that or not. See that bend in that arrow? That's because I did a complete miss of the target, hit the ground, and that's what happened, is that arrow actually bent. Now, if it's not too bad of a bend, you could probably straighten these out, and I have straightened some out successfully before, but I would be careful of that. I would not shoot that arrow in its present condition, because that's going to create a situation where, one, it's not going to fly off the bow right, two, your accuracy is going to be way off, and plus that thing can go just about anywhere. So you want to be careful of those, especially if you're shooting aluminums. Also check here in this area. You want to make sure that, let's see if I can get that to come in focus. Want to make sure up in that area that, especially if you do, hit something other than your target, that you're not getting that insert pushed in there. You're not getting any damage here. I have seen those damage and break. So again, you want to make sure that you are being careful with those. All right, so next we're going to talk a little bit about carbon arrows. And I've got one here that's really, I want to show you that here in just a moment. Anytime you're out shooting, if you have a complete pass-through or you hit something other than your intended target, meaning a rock or something to that effect, and you get something like this, go ahead and trash that. Save your insert, but check it, make sure that it's still good. But this arrow is toast. There's nothing I can do to save it. And if you'll notice, I hope you can see that, but if you'll notice right in that area right there, that split is starting to progress all the way up the spine of the arrow, or the length of the arrow rather, and you really want to just throw these away. Don't try to reuse them. Don't try to save them. It's just not worth it. It's not worth your safety, and it's not worth anybody else's safety for that matter as well. You can save the nocks. The nocks pretty well okay on this. Save your arrow nocks. You can reuse those. There's a situation where you're going to have to really not use the nocks again. I'll show you that here in just a second. So that's one arrow down. This one happened today when I was out shooting and just got these all set up and ready to go. Again, another pass through where I went straight through the target, and this was down in my testing area here in my basement. And what happened was, went through the target, hit the brick wall behind it, the concrete wall behind it, and another arrow is toast. So what I'm going to do is take the inserts out of this one as well and hang on to that for future use. Now, as you practice and you get better at this sport, one thing you're going to notice is your accuracy is going to increase exponentially. And with that increase in accuracy, you're going to notice your groupings start to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And inevitably what you're going to hear is this, whenever the arrows go into the target. If you're hearing that sound, that's an indication that, great, your groupings are getting better because you're getting more pinpoint on your accuracy there. But you also want to be mindful of your arrows, because at the speed those arrows are traveling, whenever they impact another carbon arrow, they can cause some damage and really wreak havoc on your arrows. So it really becomes critical at that point that you start checking and inspecting your arrows before and after each shot, especially if your groupings are getting better. Here's an example of one that I did, and I saved it just for, couldn't believe that I actually did it purposes. So let me zoom down here and you can take a look at this one. All right, now like I was saying, as you get better at your aiming and your groupings get better, what you're going to notice is you could damage your nocks because those arrows are getting tighter and tighter and tighter. So if you're hearing this, that means your arrows are hitting and you really want to inspect them. Now if you'll look at this knock right here, what happened was I actually hit the knock with the other arrow tip and it ricocheted off. Of course, it still went in the target. And it did a lot of heavy damage to not only the knock, but also the carbon shaft as well, if you can see that. Hopefully you can see that. But this arrow's toast. There's no way I can use it again. There's no way I'll be able to safely shoot this arrow, because what's going to happen is, as I draw back, if I tried to put another knock in this, that shaft's going to split. And when that thing splits, you run the risk of shooting an arrow through your hand. You definitely don't want that. Now, the last one on the list here, it's one that I wanted to save and show everybody. Now, if you look at this arrow, there's nothing wrong with the insert, field tip, everything looks good. The arrow looks pretty solid all the way down. Even at the back end, no knock damage, nothing wrong there. But this arrow is flawed. This arrow is not going to be used ever again, and I'm going to strip down the components and reuse them. And the reason I'm going to do that is because right here in this area, what happened is I actually hit this arrow whenever I shot the arrow following it. And what it did was it actually cracked and damaged the carbon here. And because of that, this arrow is now weak and I will not be able to use it. You can't see it. And the only reason I found it is because after I made that impact, I wanted to check and see what was going on with the arrow because it made a weird sound. And you can hear that thing popping and you can actually see the carbon bowing up there just a little bit. So this is not going to work anymore. This arrow will be stripped of its components and I will be putting it, to the side for, I don't know, I may use it for something else, but I'm definitely not going to shoot it out of any of my bows. I don't care what the draw weight is. So again, I hope that's giving you some ideas and things to look for whenever you are target practicing and just keeping yourself safe. And then here's another example of a knock that I damaged. Even though it's minor damage, you have to think these things are taking a lot of force. They're taking really a lot of stored energy from those limbs that's transferred to the string, and then that is going to this single point on your arrow to shoot that arrow down range. So you really want to make sure that you're inspecting these, especially when your groupings get tighter. So I hope this video has helped you some, especially if you're new to the sport of archery, some things that you can look for to be safe when you're out shooting. Safety is key and it's critical, especially in a sport like this, when you're dealing with something that can travel at a high velocity and high rate of speed. So definitely take some time to check your equipment, make sure that you're being safe out there. Another thing too is fatigue. Think about it. Fatigue is one of those things that can really have an effect on anything you do, not just the sport of archery. So if you're getting tired, stop for a little while, take a rest, take a breather, take a break, heck, put it up for the day and come back tomorrow. Because whenever you get into that mental fatigue, you're really not, your concentration's off, and when your concentration's off, your focus is going to be off as well, and you're not going to be able to be mindful of the little things that you really need to be checking, especially when you're shooting. So again, take a break if you need to. I can't stress that enough. Another thing too, exercise. Get out and work those muscles. Get out and shoot. Get out and practice, because again, you build up strength, you build up endurance, and it kind of helps with that fatigue and it keeps you from tiring out so fast. Tell me some of the things you look for whenever you're out shooting. Put it down in the comments. Tell me some of the things that you always check or that you're religious about checking, if you will, when it comes to your equipment and your archery gear. So, that being said, let's talk about the last thing on the list, then we're going to go out and take a few shots and we'll close out this video. Is this. I was in my local archery shop the other day and yeah, they got me. They said, hey, sucker, buy these. It is the QAD Tune-A-Nocks. Now, I know you've probably seen these at your local archery shop. If you've not, let me show you one right now. These are the QAD Tune-A-Nocks. A lot lower profile than what I'm used to shooting with my bows. Now, normally I don't worry too much about nocks. I don't obsess over nocks. I just make sure that they're safe, that they're intact, there's no damage to them, and I make sure that they fit my string. So let's go out and shoot these things just a little bit. And also, I think I might have mentioned this, but I'm gonna say it again. On the packaging, they say increase arrow speed up to 4 feet per second. That's a pretty bold statement to put on a package like that, especially if somebody's coming in looking around and they see something like that and they go, ooh-wee, I'm gonna be able to shoot faster. That being said, let's go outside and take some shots with these. Let you see how they perform. All right, so we're going to take a few shots with the new QAD Tune-A-Nocks. Again, they're a nice little knock. I don't think I have anything bad to say about them. They do fit my string nicely. So let's take some shots. I'm going to start with my standard arrow knock that I usually just leave in the arrow. And again, I don't get bent out of shape about knocks, but these seem to be a pretty good little deal. Now, if you'll notice, whenever I clip them on the string, nice little click. Again, they don't come off. They're not too tight, but they do release well. So let's take a few shots with these, and we'll close this video out. I gotta quit doing that. It's one of the things I've been working on. Heard an arrow hit. Hope I didn't break another another arrow. When I made that last shot, I did hear the arrow click, and yes, I damaged another nock. It hit right there and deflected, but the carbon, the shaft of the arrow is still good, so I'll be able to use it again. I will inspect it fully though. But again, I hope you've enjoyed this video about the safety aspects of archery and things you should be looking for, especially if you're a new archer. Don't shortcut this. Don't take the easy route and just kind of grab things and go out and start shooting, because you want to be safe and you want to keep yourself out of harm's way, and of course keep others out of harm's way whenever you're out practicing. So again, leave it in the comments below what you do or what you check, or kind of your process when you go out to target practice, if you even have a process. And continue to leave comments, whether good, bad, right, wrong, or indifferent. I love all the comments, and you guys really bring it when it comes to that. Thank you for coming by. To my new subscribers, I really appreciate you thinking enough of my content to subscribe. And if you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing and come back and join us. Hit the notifications bell whenever I do post future content. You can come in, hang out with me for a little while. We can learn together, we can grow together, because that's what this community is about, learning and growing in this sport of archery. I thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I know I say that a lot, but it is heartfelt, and I do mean it. And I do hope I continue to give you the content that you enjoy watching. And leave in the comments as well, what would you like to see? One thing that I did get a few comments on in my last video was the Spider XL takedown bow. I've been asked to compare that to the original Samick Sage, and the other question that I've gotten more than once was, do the limbs from my Southwest Archery Ghost takedown bow fit the Spider XL? According to Southwest Archery's website, they are interchangeable. I did measure the limb pockets. They are identical, with maybe just a little bit of a length difference between the Ghost and the Spider XL. So I will be trying that in a future video, swapping out the limbs and seeing if there's any performance difference between those. I'm kind of curious what the thing's going to look like once I get it put together, because the riser for the Ghost bow is a lot different than the riser for the XL. So again, thank you so much. I hope you have a great Thanksgiving coming up, and I hope you have time to spend with family and friends and just get some downtime from the craziness in the world around us. But as always, thank you. I hope you have a great day, a better day tomorrow, and a wonderful week ahead of you. And until next time.